when the college football playoff committee announced their Final Four. In my head, I'm on NFL game day morning. I'm talking about it, and I start thinking to myself, who are some of the people who I respect and appreciate? What are they thinking about it? You were coming to mind, and then I went about my day, for the professional day of football, and then I turned to my phone, and then I see the headline. College football has always had the best regular season in sports. It doesn't anymore. And I'm like, okay, now I know how Bruce feels about it. I'll give you the floor.
I didn't think about it that clearly. It didn't resonate until I actually sitting there watching this. And they are 13-0. They were in a Power 5 conference. By the way, the guy who will probably win the Heisman this weekend, Jaden Daniels, who ran through the SEC, they did the best job of slowing him down, and they were leading LSU 45-17 with a minute left in that game. Like, it was not close. They dominated them. Their defense is really good. But their offense, now that Jordan Travis is out for the season, struggled. It has struggled the last 2 games. Now, this past week, they were playing their third-string quarterback because their backup, Tate Rodemaker, who has played, and last year he led them to a comeback win at Louisville where he was impressive. But against Florida in a rivalry game, he was shaky, but he also left the game with a concussion, didn't play this past week against Louisville. The committee took it upon them to say, well, that offense that we just saw on Saturday night, we don't think it's a good matchup. We don't think they have a chance to win that. Well, that guy who is playing Brock Lynn is probably wouldn't be the guy to start anyway. But the committee already just wrote them off. And my problem with this is the games need to matter. This is an undefeated team. This is an undefeated team who, by the way, scheduled 2 really good SEC opponents. It's not their fault that Florida stinks this year. But, in the non-conference, they ran through the rest of the league. They have a lot of talented players on both sides of the ball. And here's Alabama, who lost at home by 10 to Texas. It wasn't anything fluky. They did beat Georgia, and that's a legitimate big-time win. 2-time defending champs. They knocked them out. But the week before, if you want to talk about eyeball test, they barely beat Auburn. And Auburn's not good this year. Auburn the week before got smashed by New Mexico State. But the committee could not fathom the idea of not having an SEC champ in there, even with 1 loss. And obviously, the SEC has been the most dominant conference in college football the last 2 decades. This has not been a great year for the SEC, though. There's no way around that. But the committee just couldn't bear the thought of no SEC team, and ultimately, they screwed Florida State.
So let's stroll down a little bit of pushback lane here. Certainly, since my colleague across the aisle, Chris Brockman, feels completely differently about this.
Well, he's wrong.
Well, here we go.
Oh,
here we go.
So harsh.
Because your point is that, sure, Jaden Daniels was held down by Florida State. It was week 1, though. What do you say to that?
That's when the game was played.
Okay.
But that's essentially the preseason, right?
That's what you've been saying to me for days. So, and I'm not just saying it because I agree with him. I'm allowing for the pushback conversation to be had. Because you're not the only one who feels this way.
I get it. This defense, though, is also the only one who's held a Jeff Brom offense under 200 yards in 5 years. Like, they're really good on defense. They have really good receivers. They're a talented team. The trigger man struggled the base of you're going off of 1 game. It was at Florida in a rivalry game. He didn't play great. Okay. But that's basically what people are writing off. I'd find it hard to believe that if Alabama was beating Georgia, and on like the last series, even though they were winning, if their quarterback got hurt and, was out for the season, that they would have written off Alabama the same way. I just don't buy that.
What about the idea that the College Football Playoff Committee did include in its thinking a result from the season in that they couldn't take Alabama without Texas?
I think that's very true. Like, I think if Georgia won and was undefeated, Georgia's number 1, Michigan's 2, Washington's 3, and then maybe Florida State does go. But I think it was like they were boxed in because they couldn't take Texas without taking Alabama. They just could. I don't think to them, that was this was probably a more palatable solution than that one was.
Would there have been a bigger outcry if they had taken Florida State but taken Alabama and left Texas out?
Yeah, I think head-to-head is hard. Now, it's not Texas's fault, by the way. We were just talking about Florida wasn't very good, and that's who Florida State was playing. But the Big 12 was really bad outside of Texas. They played an Oklahoma State team that lost to South Alabama and UCF. Neither team is anywhere near a top 25 team. Lost them like 78-10 by a combined score.
But to be fair, the Big Ten outside of Michigan and Ohio State, with all due respect to Penn State, it was one large wasteland. I mean, Iowa's defense, so I guess half of Iowa, we have to include Iowa's defense, was championship quality. I think you could say that.
But you usually have two very talented teams in there. I don't think, like Penn State's offense this year was really disappointing.
Right.
I get it, but I think they are, I think they're going to get the benefit of the doubt, quite honestly.
So while we're playing what if Oregon had beaten Washington? Do you think with the other results that came down, they would have left the Pac-12 winner out? See you later?
No, I think Oregon would have still gotten that spot.
Okay.
I do, because they would have avenged their one loss. It was a close loss, and I think people looked at Oregon on the eyeball test and were like, all right, they're talented on both sides of the ball. They have a really good quarterback. Ultimately, I just think that the committee, got some feedback here. It's like, all right, well, the matchup, we've had a lot of blowouts in the playoff. And I think if you're ESPN, you didn't want that. You're paying a lot of money for this.
So you think Texas winning was the death knell for Florida State? Because even if Georgia had beaten Alabama, the SEC's getting a team in, right? And then Texas winning gave them the opportunity to put a one-loss Big 12 team in.
One loss with one really good win.
Florida State, because Big 10's going, Pac-12's going, SEC's going, and Florida State would have gotten in over Texas, so Texas gets in because Alabama won, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and so you've always had this really flawed system. There are 5 Power 5 conferences for 4 spots.
Yeah. Right.
This has had the potential for this to happen always. It's just the last year of this before we go to 12 next year.
Yeah.
It's when it really splintered apart on them. And, it was almost bound to happen, and it just hadn't happened like this until now. But like in the past, Cincinnati was undefeated, and they came from a group of 5 conference. And I think people thought it was a pretty good team, but I don't think anybody looked at them and go, oh yeah, they're one of the, I don't think anybody. I don't think a lot of people looked at them and go, oh, they're one of the 4 best teams. And if you're going to go by 4 best, who does Vegas think? Who does, if you ask Daniel Jeremiah and the NFL personnel people, they'd be like, oh, Georgia or whatever is one of the 4 best. That's the get out of jail free card for a lot of this, is like the best is now really Trump's most deserving. And if you asked me, and this is to me the wrong way to approach it, but if it's like, oh, on a neutral field, who would you pick? Well, on a neutral field, me and Vegas and everybody else were picking Washington to lose again to Oregon. That didn't happen. It's still like...
Yeah, I mean, the whole business is just like, the results matter. The records matter. Let the chips fall where they may, because that's all that matters. Not like, let's try and figure out best and final, figuring out all that stuff.
How would you feel if you're an Ohio State fan, if you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah.
What did I do? If you're a Michigan fan and late in the game, J.J. McCarthy re-aggravates like a leg, and then he can't play. And all of a sudden it's like is the committee now evaluating Jack Tuttle off of whatever?
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.